All right, this is our first homework of the year, working with functions. I might split this up into two videos, as this one might be a little bit long. Again, when you're using these videos, you can use these videos or ask somebody for help or whatever, but at the end of the day, you need to make sure you know how to do everything. So if you used a video or help from a friend or anything else to be able to solve your homework problems, you want to go back later on your own and make sure you can do it yourself. What that looks like is covering up the things that you did, that you walked through on the video, and seeing can you do it by yourself. So make sure if you use these videos that you do that. Okay, on this homework, I'm going to walk through quite a bit of it just because I think different people are coming in with different levels of Algebra 1 knowledge. This first thing, the domain and the range for each function, I'm going to go over all three of these because I want to make sure our notation is good. Domain is I'm going to write this here, domain is the set of all possible x values or input values that will actually get you an output. So as long as if you put in an x, the function will tell you what comes out, and this is kind of how I model a function. There's an input that goes in, there's a function, and it tells you what comes out. As long as you'll get something out when you put in an x, that's a value that's part of the domain. And the range is the set of all possible output values or y values. So all the different things you could get out. So let's look at this. F of x. The question is, what x's are we allowed to put into this that we will get something out? And there's two ways to do this. One is just to look at it and think, well, is there anything we couldn't put in for x and square it and multiply by 3 and subtract 4? And the answer is no, there's nothing we can't put in. We'll get an output value for anything. You put in -500, well, you can get something out from that. So there are three ways to write this domain. One is this symbol, and this means all real numbers. It's an R with a double line at the beginning, all real numbers. We can put in anything for x. Another way we could write this is using set notation. We could put x goes between -infinity and infinity. And notice that it's not or equals to because we can't ever equal infinity. And a way that some of you may have done in Algebra 1, but maybe not everybody, is interval notation. This is my favorite way. It's the most useful as you get up to higher level math. So you want to make sure you understand it. We put parentheses, -infinity, comma infinity. It almost looks like a point, but it's not. This is called an interval. And the way you read it is the interval from -infinity to infinity. It means all the x's in between -infinity to infinity. The range, the output values, are not all the real numbers. You won't necessarily get everything out of this. And here it's useful to make a little graph of what this looks like. We know that the parent, this is a quadratic because x is being squared. And you should know from Algebra 1 that the parent function for quadratics is a parabola with a vertex at 0, 0. The transformations that are happening here is this -4 shifts the entire parabola down by 4. And the 3 stretches it a little bit, so it ends up looking more like this. So the question is, what are the y values we'll get out? Well, the y values never get below -4. And so there are a couple ways we could write the range. We could write all the y values need to be greater than or equal to -4. So it's saying all the y's are above -4. We'll never get any outputs that are less than -4. Or using interval notation, we could say all the values between -4 and infinity. And you might notice I used a bracket here, and this is because it could equal -4. So whenever there's an or equals to, we use a bracket, and whenever it can't equal the endpoint, we use when it can't equal the endpoint, we use a parentheses. When it can, we use a bracket. Okay, let's look at g of x. G of x is very different. Now, g of x is a table. It is unrelated to f of x. These are just three completely separate functions, and we want to know what the domain is. What are all the possible input values that will give us an output value? Well, there are only 5. These are the only 5 input values we have. If we try to put in like 7, well, what comes out? We don't know. This function doesn't tell us, and so it isn't one of the input values. So We're not going to use this method of writing the domain. This is when x could be all the numbers in between. And so for instance, if we put all the numbers in between -4 and 4, this would be wrong because it's not all the numbers between -4 and 4. For instance, you can't put in 1. The number 1 will not give us an output. And so we can't use this continuous domain. Instead, the way we write the domain is we open up braces. This is what we do if we're just going to list individual x values. And we go from lowest to highest. -4, -3, 0, 2, and 4. And we close with braces. We do this anytime we're just listing values. The range, we're going to have to do the same things. There are only a few output values. And we're going to go from lowest to highest. So in this case, we're not starting at -4. We're actually starting with the lowest y values. -6, -3.5, 1, and I'll let you finish off the other ones just so you can make sure you know what's going on there. H of x is our last one, and I want to do this one with you as well. Again, if you're feeling good from these first two, you should be able to stop the video right here, pause the video, and try to do the domain and range for h of x yourself. Think to yourself, is it a continuous domain or a discrete domain? I'll give you a second to pause it. If you have it, I'm going to go ahead and start doing h of x here. Now, when we're doing h of x, there are a couple tricky things here. The domain is all the possible x values, and we can see the different x values we'll get for this one. I'm going to do it in interval notation. The x values go between -2 and 5, and it has all of the x values in between -2 and 5. And so we're going to use this first kind, this continuous domain and range, because it has all the ones in between. So the way we're going to write it is -2, 5, bracket. And you might want to think about this for a second. Why did we do this? Well, this says the same thing as -2 less than x less than or equal to 5. And you'll notice that x cannot equal -2 because when x is -2, there's a blank circle. That means there isn't a value that comes out for -2. On the other hand, when we put in 5, there is a y value that comes out. And so x can equal 5, but x cannot equal -2. We use the bracket when we use the or equals to when it could have a value at 5. We use the parentheses when it doesn't have a value there. I'll let you do the range on your own. Okay. Let's look at this next part. Now I'll stop the video here and I'll do it in a second part.